Well, when it comes to the stock market, it looks like bad economic news is good news for stock prices. Once again, the Federal Reserve, best advice I can give you right now, the next time Capitol Hill asks you to come visit for 2 days for a question and answer session, you should probably spin around the block twice like you've got no place to park, because that looked pretty brutal. Mortgages, as I always say, they're just like fingerprints. No two are alike, and especially right now. And housing, it looks like FOMO, fear of missing out, has once again entered the conversation, but this time, thankfully, it's on the seller's side. Welcome back to This Week in Mortgage, everybody. My name is Sam Battaglia, your mortgage broker here at Guaranteed Rate in Beverly Hills. Hope you're having a great week. All right, stock market. As I mentioned last week, things should settle down and stabilize after the Federal Reserve did do their 75 basis point move, which probably, it looks like, showed the markets that there is a light at the end of the tunnel because they're probably getting more with things. Moving forward, like I mentioned, bad economic data is going to be good for stocks and bonds because this is all in the belief the Federal Reserve will back off and not continue on with their planned, ill-advised, in my humble opinion, rate hikes. Looks like we've entered a stock pickers market again. We're no longer in the environment where a rising tide lifts all boats. That is the theory for the stock market when the Federal Reserve is fully supporting things. They're not right now, so it's time to earn your keep against stock pickers and pick those stocks. As I mentioned a few weeks ago, a lot of companies have sold off on Wall Street, and it looks like they're very ripe for takeovers, whether they be friendly or hostile. And we've definitely learned in the last few weeks, especially this week, the two basic human factors that drive the stock market are one, fear, and two, greed. And which one is number one and which one is number two, depending on if you're a bull or a bear. And I've got a couple of ideas about these two words that I actually don't want to say anymore, but I'm going to say them. The R word, recession, and the I word, inflation. Just because the contrarian in me thinks just because everybody's such an expert now in inflation and that we're going to have a recession, again, the contrarian in me is starting to actually doubt that as the herd mentality pours in, the odds go down of that thing that the herd is mentalizing towards. It goes down and happening. So, I don't know. We could not hit a recession just because everyone thinks we're going to, because as we know, the herd is never always right. Otherwise, everyone would always be billionaires. All right, moving on to the Federal Reserve. I think it's time to redefine their job, especially after watching what happened the last few days on Capitol Hill. The Federal Reserve's job is to balance the economy. That's their one job. They don't have a second job. They have one job, balance the economy. And they have all their tools and levers of money supply, interest rates, money flow, whatever direction it's going to go in. But their job is to balance the economy. And like I said a few weeks ago, that's just money. So, if you're the chairman of the Federal Reserve, well, you have a very hard job. He sat on Capitol Hill for 2 days. In my opinion, the first and second days should have been discussing the theory of economics with the lawmakers. Economics is a theory, it's not a science. If you approach something that's a theory that's open for discussion and debate and treat it as a perfect science, you're not addressing the right things. People have to understand, economics is a theory, not a science. And when you're asking the Federal Reserve Chairman about things that he has no control over that we've discussed here before, the Federal Reserve has no guidance over gas prices and has no guidance over food prices. And for some odd reason, everyone on Capitol Hill kept asking the Federal Reserve Chairman what he was going to do about gas and food. And I saw him maybe, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw him maybe answer those questions 10, 15 times, and the answer was the same. That's not my department. At a certain point, I actually felt bad for him. And at another certain point, I actually just thought he should have just held up a mirror or a sign with a card with a sign on it that says, not my department on that sign, or held up a mirror and asked themselves the questions, because the Federal Reserve, once again, is just money. All right. They are just money, and they are interested in pricing stability. Because as we all know, in life and in everything else, in planning certainly, pricing stability is a very important thing. Just like the jerky moves we've had in the mortgage market this year, so is the Federal Reserve with every single thing they're looking at. They want pricing stability. Because just like Mike Tyson said, everyone's got a plan till they get punched in the mouth. Federal Reserve's gotten punched in the mouth a few times this year, And I heard the chairman of the Fed repeatedly say, we want pricing stability. Once they have stability, they can plan for us. Something else I noticed, an observation, is the Federal Reserve Chairman seemed like he was giving signals out when talking about the R word, recession. A recession, as we've defined here multiple times, it's 2 consecutive quarters of slower growth. 2 consecutive quarters of slower growth coming off of unprecedented quarters of growth isn't a deep recession. It's technically a recession, but how deep is the recession? Looks like some people are starting to figure out it might not be that deep and it might not be that long if the Federal Reserve gets on board and doesn't choke out the consumer. But I think the Federal Reserve is asking everyone to define a recession, and if 8% growth 2 quarters in a row coming off of 10% growth 4 quarters in a row is the worst thing in the world, and we all know that it's not. All right. They kept asking about gas and food. I felt so bad for the chairman there. That's not his job. That's not his department. And again, he should have just held up a mirror, held up a sign saying, not my department. And my problem is, and these are their words, not mine, one of the senators described the chairman of the Federal Reserve as the most powerful person in the world. Well, when you ask the most powerful person in the world a question, they answer it to the best of their ability, and the person that asks that question gets up and leaves the room. What kind of respect and what kind of audience are you giving the most powerful person in the world, the chairman of the Federal Reserve? I just don't understand sometimes. Are they just asking questions for a soundbite, for a commercial, for re-election, or do they actually care and want to understand this person's answers? Because it seems like a lot of them are still confused about what the Federal Reserve's job is. Nothing to do with food and gas. That's actually their job. So I actually felt bad for him that they called him the most powerful person in the world and they wouldn't sit around waiting for him to answer every question they had asked. All right, moving on. Mortgages. Mortgages also have settled down, like I mentioned last week, knock wood. Hopefully the worst is over. We hit a yield a couple weeks back, about 347, 348 on the 10-year. We went back down a couple days ago and tested 3%. Maybe that was yesterday, Thursday, and we bounced off of it, but that was a nice 50 basis point drop and not that long. Just like we had the last 75 basis points come to us in 3 days. Well, this is the definition of easy come, easy go. Looks like the 10-year Treasury is settling down right now. And hopefully we retest that 3% level on the way down next week for the bond market. And we break through it and head lower, and that's going to bring affordability back into the fold here as it has softened up and gotten better this week. But mortgages are indeed like fingerprints, and right now they are very sensitive to certain things. Pricing for mortgages is very sensitive right now for LTV, credit scores, whether your property is a primary residence, a second home, or an investment property, whether your loan amount is conforming or jumbo, and whether you're looking for an ARM loan or a fixed loan. All of this right now in the mortgage market is adjusting and ever-changing and settling into the new normal. So right now, pricing is so sensitive as it was back in the Great Recession in 2008 and 9, maybe more so in some places when it comes to categorizing a loan. And the Federal Reserve did reiterate their support for the mortgage-backed security market. That was only about 1 minute of the conversation they had. But that is low-key the best part of that whole 2 days he had, is, for me at least, is the mortgage market is healthy. And the government's proven it out. The forbearance that happened over the last few years, low-key, once again, was the greatest thing ever done for the housing market. And I would like to continue to give the Federal Reserve props for saving the housing market. And the housing market itself, well, it looks like FOMO is back, fear of missing out. But this time, somehow, it's on the seller's side. So the sellers are now afraid they're not going to get the top dollar for their property, so they're coming onto the market. Affordability in the last week is coming back into play. And the buyers and sellers, if the sellers are coming back into the market right now, and the buyers, thankfully, are still there, we're probably setting up to have a very healthy, well, I'll say much healthier than anticipated second half of the year for the real estate market. And as always, my favorite part of the housing market that I mentioned, mortgage market is fully liquid, and a lot of people want to lend money, and hopefully these rates adjust down to where the consumer wants to borrow this money. Okay, everybody, that is my show for this week. I hope you had a great week, and I hope you have a great weekend as well. Any mortgage-related questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Have a wonderful weekend.